Welcome back, partner. It's been a while. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we're back talking about the Wild Wild West. My mustache almost sweated off. Last time I did a video on cowboy or western related things, it was a dapper history about Big Nose the Outlaw. I had a lot of fun with that one. I love the Wild West. I think it's such a rich setting for stories and the history around it is so fascinating. But today is not a dapper history. And it's also not a disturbing book review. We're doing something in the middle. Blood Meridian is considered to be one of the best books in American literature. Described as an anti-Western, this book blends surreal religious symbolism with shockingly accurate historical fiction. The author, Cormac McCarthy, who is my enemy and I hate him, moved to El Paso, Texas, learned Spanish, and spent over 10 years researching the real-world people who directly inspired characters and events in this book. Historians say that besides certain parts of the book which are clearly meant to be surreal or symbolic, Blood Meridian is one of the most accurate depictions of this time period ever put to fiction. When it was first published, it came out to not great reviews. Westerns and stories about cowboys and Indians were pretty beloved in American culture at the time. People loved stories about the strong, brave heroes of the West who were rugged and honorable. Then here comes Blood Meridian, which is not the kind of Western that anyone wanted to see. It wasn't fun or adventurous. It didn't have an honorable protagonist who fought for what was right. It was gross and raw and honest in its depiction of the Wild West. It didn't shy away from showing the damage that cowboys, specifically American cowboys, were doing to people. The stories about cowboys and Indians are a lot less fun when you're actually seeing what the cowboys did to the Indians. The protagonist is only referred to as the Kid. It follows his story traveling around North and Central America, riding with the Glanton gang, a real-world gang of scalp hunters who took part in the genocide of indigenous people. In case you haven't picked up on it by now, this video is gonna be kind of a downer. Let me just set some expectations for what this video is. This is not going to be a historical deep dive into the Glanton gang. This is not going to be a summary of the whole story of Blood Meridian. If you want an in-depth summary and analysis of the whole book, I would recommend watching Wendigoon's long-ass video. He goes through almost everything and it's 5 fucking hours long. I am not going to be doing that. I want to discuss one character. One little guy. He's not a little guy. The man of the hour, John Jackson. He's not a main character. He's not a huge driving force of the plot. But the little bits that we do get of his story are so fascinating and tragic and mysterious that it's haunted me since reading this book. The story of Black Jackson is a tale of tragedy, fate, and darkness. And that's what we're going to be discussing today. But first, I should give trigger warnings because there's a lot of them. Are we past the 1 minute mark? I'm gonna get demonetized anyway, who fucking cares? Trigger warnings for things I'm going to be discussing in this video. If you don't want to hear about any of the following, I would really recommend sitting this one out. Murder, violence, torture, animal abuse, death of an animal, child abuse, death of a child sexual abuse, sexual assault, rape, pedophilia, genocide, slavery, racism, specifically anti-Black and anti-Indigenous racism, slurs of all kinds, ableism, body mutilation, and war. Also, fairly massive spoiler warning for the whole book of Blood Meridian. I can't believe I forgot to mention that in my first recording. Now, before we get to the man of the hour, I need to give a little bit of context on the Glanton gang. If you've already read the book and you know all of this, sorry, I'll try to go quick. If you haven't read the book and you know none of this, sorry, I'm about to go really fast. The days of the Wild Wild West were marked by a massive genocide of indigenous people, an ethnic cleansing that was so effective it would later go on to inspire Hitler in carrying out the Holocaust. Yes, that is real. Look it up. They wanted to get rid of indigenous people in any way possible. And so they set up a kind of bounty that anyone could participate in. People who signed up would be paid a certain amount of money for each indigenous person that they killed. This is where the Glanton gang comes in. The Glanton gang, which remember is very much based on a real gang of psychopaths, they would ride from town to town, getting contracts with different government officials. Then they'd head out into the world, find a village of indigenous people, and massacre them. Additionally, they would scalp each victim that they killed, which is why I refer to them as scalp hunters. For the gang, this act of torture was nothing more than a way that they could be properly paid for their labor. In the book, they repeatedly refer to these scalps as their receipts. I think it goes without saying that the Glanton gang are like, not good people. The first time the kid sees the Glanton gang, they're described as looking like monsters. Hairy, stinking, blood-soaked beasts with rows and rows of human scalps dangling from their belts. Some of them wore necklaces of ears or fingers, brandishing them proudly as a token of a job well done. Naturally, the kid was like, yeah, this seems like the kind of people I should surround myself with. I'm like 14, by the way. The Glanton gang itself has roughly a zillion members. They're kind of a rotating cast of characters as members are constantly dying, so the gang is constantly recruiting new people. All of the characters are interesting in one way or another, but I'm not talking about them. I'm only talking about John Jackson, baby. So here's a really quick rundown of the only characters who will be relevant to my video. John Joel Glanton. He's the leader of the Glanton gang, and I want to remind you all again that he was real. John Joel Glanton was a real person who did these things. The events of this book are based on his actual life. In the book, he's portrayed as being a grizzled old bitch who kills without hesitation and feels no remorse. He loves drinking, shooting, and money. But money is really what it's all about. It's made clear to us very early on that despite participating in this genocide, Glanton doesn't really fucking care about the reason behind it. Right. At the end of the day, the only reason he's doing this is for a paycheck. He's a good representation of the gang's values, or lack thereof. He has no loyalty, all his morals and values and opinions are malleable. As long as he has something to gain from the situation, that's all that matters. And despite being the leader of the Glanton gang, it's clear that he's not the one who holds all the power. That would of course be the judge. If you've heard anything about Blood Meridian, it was probably about He's the most infamous character in the book, and for very good reason. Now, I could go on and on yapping about the judge and how he's so fucking scary, but is this video titled, What's Up with the Judge? No! Countless people have already made in-depth analysis videos on the judge, so if you're really curious about this character, you can watch one of those. I'm here to talk about John Jackson, and that's what I shall do. But first, I do have to talk about the judge a little bit, because the judge is relevant to John's story, sorry. The judge is described as being a 7-foot-tall, bald, obese albino. He's incredibly strong and fast. He's also impossibly smart. He's an expert in the field of law. He knows the history of everything. He speaks every language, including Latin. It doesn't take a genius to know that there's something kind of up with the judge seems to regularly bend the laws of reality. It's clear that he knows something that we don't, that he's not letting us in on. He'll sometimes say these cryptic things about fate and the universe and man's role within it. Plug's a little weird, and unfortunately he's also not chill. But the part of the judge that is the most relevant to what I'm going to be talking about today is his sadism. The judge is bloodthirsty. He joined the Glanton gang not for the money, not for any kind of racial hatred, but just because he likes doing this. He likes hurting people. Throughout the book, he's described as calmly smiling because he's just like content and happy to be doing what he's doing. The only other thing about the judge that will become relevant later on is the fact that the judge is kind of a pervert. But you know what? Let's put a pin in that. We'll come back to that later. Meet White Jackson. Now we're getting into it. Turns out this gang of scalp hunters suffers from the same problem as most elementary school classrooms, and 2 of its members have the same exact name. That's right. The topic of our video today is John Jackson. And this guy is also John Jackson. To tell them apart, the gang refers to them as Black Jackson and White Jackson. You'll never guess why. And these 2 fucking hate each other. White Jackson is openly racist and goes out of his way to harass and antagonize Black Jackson. After joining the gang, the kid learns that the members have already placed bets on which Jackson will kill the other one first. And now, the man of the hour, Black Jackson. You know, I could sit here and describe him, but I think it would be better if I just showed you who he is. A few nights after the kid joins the gang, they've set up camp for the night. Now let me establish something about this environment. When these guys set up camp for the night and build a fire, that fire is the only source of light there is. They are in the middle of nowhere. No towns, no electricity, no light pollution at all. If you're not sitting close to the fire, you're wrapped in a thick, opaque blackness. It's difficult for a city slicker like me to conceptualize this level of darkness. Now, the Glanton gang is not all white. In fact, there is a surprising amount of diversity in this gang of genociders, but the white members of the gang are pretty racist. At mealtimes, the gang kind of naturally segregates themselves. They've built 2 fires. The white members are sitting around one, and everyone who's not white is sitting around the other. We learned that a few days back, White Jackson got fucking wasted. White boy wasted. And so he has been riding horseback, hungover, for days now. If that were me, I might, kill myself. So yeah, White Jackson's already not in a great mood. Then, here comes Black Jackson, throwing down his bag at the white man's fire and getting ready to take a seat. This cracker yells at Black Jackson, telling him to get back over to the other fire. To which Black Jackson replies, "Any man in this company can sit where it suits him." To this, White pulls out a gun and points it at Black Jackson. Well, thank God he didn't overreact. "You aim to shoot me? If you don't get your black ass away from this fire, I'll kill you graveyard dead." "Oh, really?" "Yes, really. I don't respect you because you're black." Black Jackson looks up and around the fire. A few people have moved away, but besides that, everyone just keeps eating their food. It goes without saying that no one here is about to stand up for Black Jackson. Probably because most of them share White Jackson's feelings. Finally, Black Jackson turns back to White. "Is that your final say?" "Final as the judgment of God." Okay. And with that, he turns and walks away from the fire straight into the darkness, which, remember, is unbelievably thick and all-consuming. This moment is a kind of crazy visual because he basically just went, "Can you believe him?" I tell you what, with those ones, you give them an inch, they take a mile. Am I right? You know, it honestly reminds me, in this moment, Black Jackson comes running back into the light of the fire, this time holding a Bowie knife. Before anyone can react, he swings and cuts White Jackson's head off. And just like that, White boy summer's over. From here on, since we don't have to differentiate them anymore, I'm going to be referring to Black Jackson as John, since that is his name. This is not our first interaction with John. This isn't our first time seeing him, but I believe that this is the best way of just introducing who he is and what he's all about. We learn everything we need to know about John from this one moment. John is not at all naive to the situation he's in. He is a black man in pre-Civil War North and Central America. This gang of basically his co-workers who he spends every hour of every day with openly hate him. They don't just not like him, they don't even see him as a human being. Despite this, John does not tolerate disrespect and defends himself and his right to be at the table physically. I don't think I can overstate just how crazy that is for a black character in this book to be acting like this. Blood Meridian takes place in the 1840s and 50s. Black men could be killed for speaking to a white man with the wrong tone of voice. And yet, here's John just decapitating bitches and sitting at the whites only fire because no one is brave enough to tell him he can't. Which leads us into our next point. John is fucking scary. He's deadly and he knows it. I mean, that's the whole reason that they let him into the Glanton gang. He's great at killing, and killing is what makes the gang money. So yeah, this is the Glanton gang. It's the most toxic workplace environment you'll ever see. Everything's on the table. There's no rules here. Except one. There's one rule here. The only thing that is off the table for members of the Glanton gang is deserting. Once you join the gang, you are in it for life. And if you try to leave, you're cooked. It happens a few times that a member will disappear, and Glanton sends out a search party to hunt them down. A few hours later, the search party returns, wearing the clothes of the one who ran away. Okay, before we go any further, I want to make one thing very clear. Based on how I'm talking about him, it might sound like I'm a huge defender of John Jackson. I'm a huge fan of his. I am not. He is, at the end of the day, still a member of the Glanton gang, meaning that he's one of the people carrying out the killing and the scalping of innocent people. John is absolutely a victim of racism and hatred himself, but being a victim does not make him innocent. At certain points in this video, I am going to be taking on a more sympathetic stance towards John, as I do believe that his character and his story is heartbreaking in many ways. But at no point am I going to be defending or excusing the things that he does in this book. At no point am I arguing that John Jackson is a good person. None of the members of the gang are good people. Write that down. The last thing I want is for this video to come off like, yeah, he shot a child in the head and cut their scalp off, but he's also sensitive. I think that two things can be true at once. I think we can discuss how John is a victim of hatred, and he is constantly defying the odds and struggling to overcome persecution. At the same time, he is actively, violently aiding in the persecution of another group. John is a very complex character. A lot of his story is left up to interpretation, and that's what makes him so intriguing and so fun to analyze. Speaking of which, does anyone in the audience want to see a magic trick?
They walk, they talk, they shimmy to the music.
At one point, the gang is stopped in a town, and they agree to let this family of traveling circus performers tag along with them to the next town. This is the Wild Wild West, remember. Traveling with a gang of serial killers is less dangerous than traveling through the desert alone. So night falls and the two squads are sitting around the fire, the circus performers and the gang. Things aren't super friendly between the two groups, but I guess it's boring enough that Glanton asks the performers if they'll put on a show for the gang. The father of the circus family, referred to as the juggler, agrees and eagerly sets up this very elaborate high concept magic trick. Stick with me here, it's a long one. The grandma of the circus family is blindfolded and then turned away, facing away from the fire into the darkness of the night, so she can't see anything that's happening. The juggler then presents the group with a deck of tarot cards and holds it out to someone in the group. After a person picks a card, the juggler then calls out what the card is to the grandma, and without turning around or taking her blindfold off, she tells the person's fortune and then guesses who it was that pulled the card. So Granny's all set up and the juggler starts going around asking for a volunteer. John stands up and approaches the juggler. He pulls a card. It bore the picture of a fool and a harlequin and a cat. The juggler calls out to the grandma, "El tonto, el tonto," said the woman. She raised her chin slightly and began a sing-song chant. When she's done reading the fortune, the juggler asks her who pulled the card, and she correctly guesses in Spanish, the black. Okay, reason number 1 fucking billion that I hate Cormac McCarthy is that we never get to read what the grandma's fortune was for John. We get to hear at least parts of other people's fortunes, but we never hear a word of what she says about John. John, who is not fond of being talked about, starts going around asking anyone to tell him what the hell grandma just predicted. This goes on for like a full page of him just asking different people, what did she say? What did she say? What did she say? And no one's giving him an answer. In this moment, we, the reader, are trapped in shared helplessness with John. We also want to know what the fuck she just said, but in a book that is so jam-packed with words, this is a handful of text that we do not get the privilege of reading. After an unbearable amount of time, John finally asks the judge, who remembers, speaks every language, and knows everything, and is evil. What does she say? What does she say? I think she means to say that in your fortune lie our fortunes all. And what is that fortune? Are you a drinking man, Jackie? No more than some. I think she'd have you beware the demon rum. Prudent enough counsel, what do you think? That ain't no fortune. Just as John starts to pout, the judge says, "Wrinkle not thy sable brow," and I hate this bitch. Imagine you're already having a bad day, and your coworker says, "Wrinkle not thy sable brow at me." I'll kill you, actually. Anyway, wrinkle not thy sable brow at me, my friend. All will be known to you at last. To you as to every man. So, as fucking usual, the judge knows something that he's not letting us in on, and he is taking great pleasure in how uncomfortable this is making John. At this point, everyone is paying attention to this conversation. A bunch of members of the gang are staring at John, and he notices this. He stood, an uneasy honoree, and at length, he stepped back from the firelight. Once again, we see this visual motif of John disappearing into darkness. The first time we saw this was right before he killed White Jackson. Before killing Whitey, John looked up to see all the members of the gang had their heads down. They were all deliberately ignoring him in a moment when he could have used support. This time, John looks up and all the members are looking straight at him, regarding him not as a colleague, but as a spectacle they're watching unfold. There's also a huge difference with how John interacts with the darkness in both scenes. Before killing White Jackson, he deliberately turned away from the fire and walked straight into the darkness of the night, using it as a tool for his attack. He was confident and swift. He knew exactly what he was about to do and how he was going to use the night around him to do it. After getting his fortune read, we see John in a completely different state of mind. He's freaked out. He's uncomfortable. He doesn't like that everyone's looking at him. He stays facing the fire and awkwardly creeps backwards into the darkness. It's crazy. He's way more uncomfortable at the uncertainty of his fortune than he was when a racist was pointing a gun at his face. This whole interaction with the fortune teller also leads me to believe that John is quite a superstitious person. He was the first and the only member of the gang to willingly volunteer to get his fortune told. It's also clear that the fortune itself matters a great deal to John. Other members comment about how this magic trick is just idolatry or junk. But John is taking this very seriously. Let's pause here and take a closer look at the card John pulled, the Fool. To greatly oversimplify it, the Fool card in tarot represents hope and new beginnings. We see a young person, a bag over their shoulder, setting off on some journey. The sky is bright and the possibilities are endless. In this case, the word fool isn't used to call someone stupid, it's used to express youth and naivete. Setting off on their own for the first time, our fool is bound to make some mistakes and fall into some trouble, but that's not slowing them down. The Fool is completely unafraid, partly because they're oblivious to the hardships that may await them. The Fool card indicates a possible leap of faith, taking a risk for the sake of adventure or for a better future. So when John, of all people, pulled the Fool card, I was like, what the hell? He couldn't have less in common with the Fool and its meaning. He is not young, hopeful, or naive. He is painfully aware of just how stacked the world is against him. He's bitter, he's skeptical, he's defensive. He doesn't trust people, he doesn't like uncertainty. He's not the kind of person who's going to be taking a leap of faith anytime soon. And anyway, he's a member of the Glanton gang, so his future career is kind of set in stone. So why then, for the sake of the narrative, why would John, of all people, pull the Fool card? Let's put a pin in this idea, because we are going to be coming back to this later. After John gets his frustratingly vague fortune and disappears into the night, things kind of fall apart back at the fire. The judge tells the juggler to do the trick on Glanton. Glanton pulls a card, but then it disappears from his hand before the juggler can see it. Maybe he dropped it into the fire. Maybe he saw the card and didn't like what he was seeing. Maybe it did vanish into thin air by magic. It doesn't matter what Glanton's card actually was, because as soon as it disappears from his hand, the old woman can somehow still tell Glanton's fortune, and she begins her chant in Spanish. Glanton starts freaking out and yelling at someone to shut her up. She's saying something about a carriage, an inverted float, a letter of war, of revenge, something without wheels on a dark river. Glanton is now fully tweaking and screams at her to shut up, but she does not, going on about a hex, a curse, a chariot of the dead, full of bones, a young man who Glanton points his gun at the old woman and screams, "By God, you will shut up!" Luckily, the judge scoops up Glanton like a little baby and the situation kind of defuses. Party's over. Everyone go to bed. Eventually, they make it to the town where the circus performers were trying to reach. The gang stops to refuel on some food and bevs, while the circus family sets up a makeshift stage in the town square. They're going around advertising, announcing, "The circus is in town, gather around the tent to see a demonstration." The kid and a few other members of the gang are standing off to the side watching, when one of them says, "Look yonder, chappies," which, first of all, unnecessarily gay way to say that. This next bit is so bizarre and confusing that I had to reread it like 3 times and then also look up the spark notes just to make sure I was like understanding this part correctly. Here's what it says. "They turned to look where he pointed. The black stood stripped to the waist behind the tent, and as the juggler turned with a sweep of his arm, the girl gave him a shove, and he leapt from the tent and strode about with strange posturings under the lapsing flare of the torches." What just happened? Let's review. John, for some reason, is standing behind the circus tent just hanging out with the performers with his shirt off. The little girl of the family pushes him. And at first I thought she was pushing him because she was scared because, you know, he's a shirtless serial killer lurking by her. But no, it was a playful push. like the way you'd shove a friend into a dance circle. With this push, John leaps onto the makeshift stage of the circus family and starts like swaggering around with strange posturings. And that's where the chapter ends. It just stops right there. So what the fuck is going on? This interaction is so surreal and out of character, like none of it makes sense. First of all, John can't speak Spanish.
Bruh.
What is he doing hanging out with the circus performers who almost solely speak Spanish? And how did they get him to coordinate this funny little bit with them? Oh yeah, and why on earth was John getting silly with it? Remember, this is John Jackson we're talking about. He decapitated a guy with a Bowie knife just a little bit ago. He has never shown himself to be a silly, goofy guy, and yet here he is, with his shirt off, doing strange posturings, seemingly just for the fun of it. It kills me that the chapter ends right there, because I'm dying to know what the gang's reaction to this is. At no point before or after this moment do we ever see John acting theatrical or flamboyant or performative or funny. It's just such an unexplainable, weird little occurrence, which I sure hope won't come up again later.
Or they break, or they shake. They bend way back.
Chapter 14 is very strange. The gang finds themselves in another little town in Mexico. We could have had a quiet Saturday, but Glanton's in a mood, so he decides to cause a problem. He rips down and disrespects a Mexican flag, which makes the townspeople very upset, which leads to an all-out brawl between the gang and all these random civilians. The details of this fight aren't important. All you gotta know is that it's complete chaos. A bunch of civilians get killed. A few members of the gang get killed too. Most of the gang manages to escape, and they regroup a ways away. It's at this point that the judge notices one specific member is unaccounted for. He approaches a newer recruit and grabs his horse by the jaw. Where's the black man? I don't know. Uh-oh, John's missing. How many men did you happen to see in the square? I didn't have time to take no head count. There were 3 or 4 shot that I know of, but not the black man. I never saw him. Uh-oh, John's missing and the judge is pissed. At this point, another member rides up and testifies. There was no black man in the square. I seen him shoot them boys, but they were everyone as white as you and me. Without a word, the judge lets go of the horse's jaw and saddles up. A few of their members go with him. At this point, the sun has set, so they ride out into pitch blackness. At daybreak, the judge and the Delawares returned. They had the black with them. He was naked, save for a blanket he'd wrapped himself in. He was shivering with cold. He didn't even have boots. The only thing he'd saved was his pistol. He was holding it against his chest under the blanket, for he had no other place to carry it. Okay, there's a lot to unpack here, so stick with me. Once again, a lot of this is left up to speculation, and we're never given any concrete answers as to what just happened. But luckily, I'm here to explain it to you, and I'm right about everything. The moment the judge notices that John didn't leave town with them is so abruptly tense. He's usually a pretty calm, content guy. It's rare to see him get upset like this. There's clearly a sense of urgency to finding where John is. The obvious conclusion is that John just got caught up in the brawl back in town, until one of the members says, John was never in the brawl. So where is he? Babe, I got news for you. John tried to desert the gang. Now I can hear you saying, wait a minute, Jules, that can't be right. The gang kills deserters. That's like the one rule they live by. They've killed every other person who tries to desert in this book. If John had deserted, they wouldn't be bringing him back alive, right? Well, here's where things get very speculative. The book never gives us concrete answers, but I have a very strong theory as to what happened here. Remember, way back with the family of performers, John drew the tarot card of the Fool, which represents hope and new beginnings. We later saw John interacting with the performers in a way that we've never seen him act before. He's dancing, he's being silly and goofy, he's having a good time. We've never seen him like this. Well, here's my theory. I think something about this interaction with the performers got into John's head. We know he didn't understand what his fortune was, but maybe something still got through to him somehow. Maybe it was the tarot card. Maybe it was seeing how the performing family lives, traveling from town to town freely, seeing the world, creating instead of destroying. I don't know what it is, but something about this interaction lodged an idea in John's mind. The idea of, what if I didn't have to do this for the rest of my life? What if I could go somewhere else, do something else for money, get away from these men who hate me? If he did desert, the odds would be stacked against him. But if anyone could make it, it would be John. And I think John realized that. And so in town, when there was a solid amount of chaos and every member of the gang, including the judge and Glanton, were distracted, he went for it. He took the leap of faith. He embarked on the fool's journey. He knew what would happen to him if he got caught. He knows what they do to deserters, but he didn't care. In this moment, John decided that the risk of death was worth the possibility of freedom. But that's not what happened, now is it? Instead, John is brought back to the gang, shivering, barefoot, naked. Let's start with the obvious question here. If he deserted, why didn't they kill him? Well, there's a few reasons for this, and I think the most cut and dry one is simply that John is really valuable to the gang. As we've established, the only thing that really matters to Glanton is making money. John can stack up bodies like nobody else, and stacking up bodies is what makes them money. If they lose John, the gang would lose a substantial amount of their profits. Okay, sure, so they didn't kill him because they're greedy, but then why is he naked?
Bruh.
Okay, I said I wasn't gonna go on and on about the judge, but this is relevant. Remember earlier I mentioned that the judge was kind of a pervert. Well, let's talk about just how perverse he really is. Like many other important parts of this book, we are never given concrete proof of the judge's crimes, but the writing is all over the wall. Almost every time the gang rides into a new town, we hear word that a child has gone missing. And this happens over and over. Town after town after town, child after child after child. We see the judge regularly go out of his way to interact with children everywhere he goes. He shows them magic tricks. He offers them candy. He buys whatever they're selling. At one point, he takes an Apache child. Oof, okay, this is like the worst part of the whole book, for me at least. At one point, after slaughtering a village, the judge finds an Apache child who has survived and brings the child with them to camp. Of course, the child ultimately is killed and scalped, but not before we see the child sitting on the judge's lap and being fed pieces of jerky like a dog. At a later point, the gang takes in a severely mentally disabled man at the judge's insistence. They refer to him as the idiot, and the judge promptly begins treating him like a pet, feeding him meat from a bowl on the ground, walking him with a leash around his neck. And of course, the judge insists that the idiot sleeps in his quarters. The judge has a type. He is attracted to the most vulnerable people that he can find. People who never stood a chance of escaping him or fighting him off. Back to John. It might sound contradictory after I've been going on and on about how John is strong-willed and powerful and da-da-da-da-da, but John is one of the most vulnerable members of the gang. While other members of the gang develop friendships with each other, John is completely isolated. He has no one in his corner. The people that he's surrounded with day in and day out do not view him as a human being. And the world outside of the gang doesn't see him any better. John's not just in a hostile group of people, he is in a hostile world. He was born with a target on him. In short, he has always been the judge's type. It is not a coincidence that the judge wanted to personally lead the search party to bring John back alive, and it is not a coincidence that when he came back, he was naked. I'm sure you can tell what I'm implying here. The judge didn't just want to bring John back alive. He wanted to punish him, to humiliate him, to parade him in front of the other gang members. This is what happens. This is what happens when you get too cocky. Physically, he asks, "Who the fuck do you think you are?" After John's attempt to desert, the story kind of continues as normal. Like I said, John isn't like a main character, so there's not a ton of focus put on like him and his mental health, but from what we do read about him, there is a small but noticeable shift. From here on out, we never see John step out of line again. If anything, it seems like he's become even more obedient, even more loyal to the gang, to the judge. It seems that the judge's punishment, whatever it was, succeeded at breaking his spirit and wiping any hope of freedom from his mind. Which is good news for the judge, because he has big plans for the whole gang. Okay, unfortunately I have to film the rest of this video with the cowboy hat off because my cat gets scared when I have the cowboy hat on. This is my new cat, her name is Ladybug. Yeah. This this is the first time you're ever watching me film. Are you such a good, nice girl? You are a professional yapaholic, just like your mommy. Are you a yapper just like your mama? Honey, look over there. Okay. Speaking of the rest of the gang, through an elaborate series of events, they kind of take over a ferry boat, which is owned by a guy named Dr. Lincoln.
Bruh.
Oh, and in order to gain control over the boat, they also had to like form an alliance with the Yuma tribe of natives and then immediately betray the Yuma. So yeah, the Yuma are mad at them now. I'm sure that won't come up later. So the Glanton gang has a boat now, great. It's basically a pirate ship at this point because they're using the boat as a vessel to just rob people. What was that? Anyway, while they're living on the boat, word gets back to Glanton that one of their members who they had sent into town to get supplies has been arrested. So Glanton, the kid, and a handful of other relevant characters leave to go to town to try to get him back. And while they're away, they leave the... While they're away, they leave the judge in charge. Lady, shut the hell up. Turns out, leaving an omnipotent psychopath in charge of a ferry is not a good idea. When Glanton and the kid and the others return back to the boat, they find that things have spiraled into depravity. There's a crying naked girl chained to a post outside. In front of her is a dog bowl with scraps of meat. Dr. Lincoln looks filthy and he's hysterical. All he can manage to say is, "That man! That man!" Sure enough, the gang looks up in the boat. Sure enough, the gang looks to where he's pointing and sees the judge. He's naked, wearing nothing but robes of free-flowing cloths wrapped around him like an ancient philosopher. But the judge is not up there alone. Who should come out and stand next to him but John? He's also naked, wearing free-flowing robes. What the fuck is going on? Glanton, seeing all of this, decides that a nap sounds really good right about now. So, what happened? Not what happened on the boat. What happened to John? He is unrecognizable from the man we met at the beginning of this story. Remember when he was brave and proud and stubborn? After the desertion attempt, after whatever it was that the judge did to him, it seems that he's developed Stockholm Syndrome. He's not just following directions, he's devoted to the gang, dressing and acting like some kind of disciple of the judge. In fact, the way they're dressed eerily mirrors the way John looked when the judge dragged him back. They're naked, wrapped in free-flowing cloths, just like how John was naked, covered only by a blanket. Like with most important things in this book, we never get concrete answers as to what exactly happened on the boat while Glanton and the kid were away. No one's willing to talk about what happened, and no one is willing to question the judge. To avoid confrontation, the whole gang engages in their favorite coping mechanism, binge drinking by a fire! The next morning, after their raucous party, John is the first one to wake up. He goes outside to relieve himself in the river. The sun has not yet risen. It's darkness all around him. He's still naked, wrapping himself tightly in his sacred robes to fight off the morning chill. He looks down at the river where he's urinating and sees a coin. He bends down, picks it up, and is penetrated through the chest by a 4-foot arrow. The Yuma are here and they are still pissed about the gang's earlier betrayal. John frantically grabs his sides for a weapon, but there's nothing to grab. 2 more arrows impale him through the chest and groin. He falls twitching and bleeding into the river. Finally, one of the Yuma seizes him by his robes and splits his head open with a war club. John is dead. The Yuma proceed to attack the boat and everyone in it. The gang, still sleepy and hungover from the party last night, are quickly torn apart. Only a handful of members manage to get out alive. Their story continues, but ours does not. We have a lot to unpack here, my friends. The death of John Jackson is sudden and shocking. It happens so fast that by the time you've processed what you've read, he's already gone. I'll admit, the first time I read Blood Meridian, I felt kind of let down by the death of John. At this point, I was so invested in this character. I was so invested in his depressing metamorphosis. His story seemed like it was still building towards something, only to be cut short so quickly. It was disappointing in a book where the rest of the story is so cohesive, so deliberate, so brilliantly written, that this one character's fate would be rushed and unsatisfying. Wait a minute. Fate? I do have to talk about the judge a little bit. There's something kind of up with the judge. It's clear that he knows something that we don't. He'll sometimes say these cryptic things about fate and the universe and man's role within it. It bore the picture of a fool and a harlequin. What does she say? What does she say? She's saying something about a carriage, an inverted float, something without wheels on a dark river. So the Glanton gang has a boat now. Great. A letter of war, of revenge. The Yuma are mad at them now. I'm sure that won't come up later. A hex, a curse, a chariot of the dead, full of bones. A young man who, by God, you will shut up! I think she means to say that in your fortune lie our fortunes all. Are you a drinking man, Jackie? Binge drinking by a fire! Beware the demon rum. As fucking usual, the judge knows something that he's not letting us in on. All will be known to you at last. To you as to every man. Oh shit! I know. I said that I wasn't gonna spend this whole video going on about the judge. But that's the thing about the judge. He has a way of consuming everything around him. Like I said, the judge is omnipotent. All along, he has known something that we didn't. He knew from the jump that every member of the Glanton gang was going to perish horribly in one way or another. In a Faustian deal, by joining the gang itself, every member's fate is sealed. It makes sense in a karmic sort of way. These men who brought hell on earth to so many thousands of helpless people would inevitably have hell unleashed upon them too. Like I said, not all the members die on the boat, but the ones who escape, not to spoil the whole thing, but like, none of them go on to live long, happy lives, okay? One of the biggest themes of Blood Meridian, one of the major veins running throughout the whole story is fate, and the question of if our story is already written for us, or if we have control over our own destiny. The story of John Jackson is a perfect microcosm of this idea. I went on and on earlier about how strong and bold John was. He had already done the impossible. If anyone could escape the gang, it would be him. Hell, he drew the fool card. It was as if the universe was telling him, go, get out, your journey is just beginning. But that's not how this works. The judge is not going to listen to the voice of the universe. When the judge noticed John was missing, he was pissed. And not just because the gang was potentially going to lose money. Like I said from the beginning, the judge has never been doing this for money. The judge, being the omnipotent psychopath he was, already knew the fates of every person in the gang, and he knew that most of them had to die together on that boat. By deserting the gang, John threatened to change his fate. If he had been successful, he would have been the first and only member of the Glanton gang who managed to escape this Faustian deal. Maybe he could have lived a long life. Maybe he would have died of old age in his sleep surrounded by loved ones. The very idea of this was an insult to the judge. I mean, really, who does John think he is? This idiot thinks that he can rewrite his fate? Who does he think he is? Really, who the fuck does he think he is? The judge brings John back, shivering, naked, alive. John's fortune was not in his own hands. One way or another, he was going to die with the gang. He was going down with the ship. The judge's superhumanish powers are left very vague and mostly up for interpretation. But no matter how you slice it, the judge has known everyone's fates from the beginning, long before the whole fortune-telling game, long before any of them joined the gang. His story had already been written for him, permanently weaved into the judge's great divine tapestry. At first I thought it was odd that John pulled the Fool tarot card, because he himself shares no characteristics with the Fool. But it turns out, I was wrong. As far as the judge is concerned, John has always been the Fool. He was a fool forever thinking that his life belonged to him. Hey! Took me long enough, huh? I felt the need to address and apologize for how long it took this video to come out. I know I've taken long breaks in the past, but I was not expecting this one to take so long. On top of life just naturally being busier than I was expecting it to be, also, the subject matter of this video was obviously very heavy and serious, and I wanted to take the time to make sure that I was using my words carefully, I guess. I mean, there's that, and there's the fact that the subject matter of Blood Meridian and the subject matter of this video is just so fucking miserable and depressing. Like, it kind of started getting to me. Like, I couldn't really edit for long periods at a time. I needed to take breaks because the subject matter was just so fucking miserable that it would like get in my head. I know this video is a heavy one. I promise the next one won't be as heavy, and hopefully it'll be out in the next year or so. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for your patience. Subscribe if you want to, don't if you don't, and I will see you next whenever I upload. Bye!
That's only new. That's only naked.